So the government's goals of gradual eradication of Christianity, again, reinforcing their narrative that Christianity will fall by the wayside. That's what the government's trying to do. It's trying to, with this focus on the ban on conversion, apostasy, with a possible death sentence, they're making it faith a matter of life and death, prison or exile. And actually, because of these pressures, Christians are thriving and growing.
Welcome to Unmuted. I'm Edwin Opnus, and today I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Christian Van Gorder, Associate Professor of Religion at Baylor University. His academic work has focused on Islam and Christianity, world religion, and Muslim-Christian relations, and he's the author of Christianity in Persia and the Status of Non-Muslims in Modern Iran. His background includes doctoral work in Islam and Christianity at Queen's University, Belfast, teaching in intercultural studies in Western China, and work with Open Doors International serving persecuted Christians. That combination of scholarship, field experience, and long engagement with questions of faith, identity, and persecution makes him an especially important voice for this conversation. Dr. Van Gorder, welcome to Unmuted. Dr. Van Gorder, you talk about Christianity in Iran as something that has a deep Persian root, not just something brought into Iran, in the country from the West. At a time when many people see it as a foreign religion, why is it so important to recover that history?
Well, of course, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. I think that that focus disrupts the narrative that the Iranian government is trying to establish, that Iran has an Islamic identity. The facts are that Christianity has played a vibrant role in the history of Persia until the present. So I don't think we should ever see the rise of Christianity through the lens of a foreign narrative in Persia. And this is one way that Christians are sometimes persecuted. Long before Islam, during the Parthian and Sasanian period, Christians were vibrant in the communities, and they were never foreign agents. So Christianity in Iran developed separate from Constantinople and Roman influence. The Church of the East was centered in Ctesiphon. And from there, missionary activity went out. Key missionaries were going from there across Central Asia into China and India as early as the 7th century. They didn't use Greek and Latin. They experienced their faith through Syriac and Farsi. So Persian Christians have never been followers of a foreign faith. And what's exciting now is that many Christians are reclaiming that pre-Islamic spiritual history.
That's fantastic. Probably a lot of people do not know that the Persia at that time had a theological school in those days.
Right.
And you mentioned that Persian Nestorians went to China. I think there is some writings that discovered that says that the Iranians, the Persians, were here to preach the gospel to Chinese.
Yeah. It's an amazing story. It's an amazing story of resilience, of survival, and of faithfulness to the gospel under incredible persecution, even back during the time of the Zoroastrian empires, all the way through till post 1979 Islam. These Christians have had tenacious faith despite all kinds of repression, and they've grown and thrived. So that's what's exciting, and that's what we need to recognize, that Iranians are going back to their indigenous roots when they turn back to Christ. It's not a foreign inclusion.
That is exactly right. When you look at the literatures and poems left from the centuries ago, we see a lot of Christian content in there. There are a lot of ideas that you really can trace it back into the Bible. And I have a friend, a husband and wife, they're working on a certain project. They're tracing down the villages that have monasteries and turned into places for like a guest houses. And these are all the nation ones. And the names of some of these villages has come from Christian books and literatures. It's amazing that when you talk about that Christianity is indigenous to Iranians, it's something that we never really talk about in the West.
And it's even among a kind of a legacy in Muslim poetry from Iran. Rumi, Hafez. They, without really seeing it as a Christian, you read that and you can see a tremendous Christian kind of background or influence on all of Persian history.
Why do you think the government feels especially threatened by Christians who worship in Farsi openly and share their faith with Muslims inside the country?
Oh, it's a top tier threat to national security because it undermines the Iranian government's legitimacy. From their point of view, they have this strict Sharia mandatory blending of nationality with Islam. So any kind of conversion from Islam, those folks are seen as traitors, victims of Western influence, Zionist spies. So those who are making conversions to Christianity from Islam, it's a growing number, but they threaten the government's claim status to be defenders of Islam. Mosques are closing while underground churches are growing.
Yes.
So you can imagine the threat that causes. Governments accusing some of these house churches as acting on behalf of foreign powers, trying to destabilize the government. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Converts are charged with crimes against national security, raids, prison sentences, intense irrigations. And this is all from using Farsi, the Persian language, for worship. It's a direct challenge to government-sanctioned ideas. They want to bracket and pocket Christianity into a cultural, ethnic, Assyrian, Armenian church structure. And those folks traditionally have not been allowed to proselytize Muslims or use Farsi in their services.
Yes.
So when Christians are openly sharing their faith in Farsi, it's a threat because it challenges what they want, the world they want to control and present. And ironically, that is backfiring because many Muslims are drawn to Christianity because of the disillusionment with government hypocrisy, political oppression, economic mismanagement, the corruption, all of these Iranian students coming from the IRI who are taking money from common Iranians, all this money spent in terrorist activities. So all of this is just actually pushing people into listening to a Christian message that they might have never heard it before. And with the new penal code, the government is increasingly persecuting Christians. Yes. Now Christians are being branded as rioters. And this shows really the government's insecurity, very, very much afraid of the spread of Christianity.
You mentioned about the mosques are closing down. It's really, Islam is declining in Iran. They themselves have mentioned that close to 50,000 mosques are shut down because nobody is really attending. And you also mentioned something that is very important for the viewers to know, that if someone from an Islamic background comes to faith, they have some political labels and accusations. So they're basically, as you mentioned, they're a threat to the national security. And it's not. I mean, Christian faith is not separate from politics, isn't it? When you say you are a Christian, you practically, what you're saying is, I do not believe that Ayatollah Khamenei, that now is dead, is actually signed from Allah or signed from God. You just reject Ayatollah. When you reject Ayatollah's position, you practically are against the regime, and you're a political force against the state. Am I correct understanding it that way?
Yeah, I think the way I would say it is politics are superseded by the kingdom of God. In other words, Christians aren't quote political from our Christian perspective, but very much they're seen as a threat because our allegiance as Christians is to the Lord and not to any kind of narrative that makes that they want us to lord over us or control us. So, yeah, I think it's really important to have a fresher perspective and an open perspective to kind of what's really happening instead of what you're being told or fed is being happening vis-a-vis some of these really important issues.
What is funny is that in the Constitution, they say that there is a freedom of religion for everyone. If you're a Christian, you can preach or worship your faith. But at the same time, that Constitution is defined and interpreted through Sharia law. So there is a lot of restriction that basically makes your Christianity not that authentic Christianity that's supposed to be. You describe what you call a policy of gradual eradication, limiting Persian language services, restricting membership, and controlling access to the churches. How can these quieter administrative pressure coming from the state to the church become just as powerful as the persecution?
Well, it's in a way more effective. Really, it is persecution. So the government's goals of gradual eradication of Christianity, again, reinforcing their narrative that Christianity will fall by the wayside, but it's not, it's growing. And so they have to start using quiet administrative restrictions, banning Persian language services, closing churches on unfair, irrational technicality, forbidding church attendance to converts, trying to dismantle church life. But of course, that it never works. In fact, it creates the opposite. But their goal to isolate Christians and force faith underground, cut off access to the Bible, enable legal churches in the name of national security, and that leads to arrests happening. But all of that is backfiring. So the government can't attack Christians openly, but also it's not successful in trying to this project of gradual eradication. So I think we can be very encouraged, but also finding ways that Armenian, Assyrian, and converted Christians converting from Islam can find common ground. And that's what the government's trying to do. It's trying to, with this focus on the ban on conversion, apostasy, with a possible death sentence, they're making it faith a matter of life and death, prison or exile. And actually, because of these pressures, Christians are thriving and growing. Yeah. So yes, intense psychological pressure. Yes, on the part of the government expressing paranoia, fear of infiltration. So these aren't directly violent, but there are all kinds of ways that they're confiscating property. It's illegal to publish or own a Persian Bible, trying to suffocate the ability to operate. Yes. But all of these efforts will actually make the church, and are making the church stronger. Since the 1990s, the church in Iran has grown in tremendous ways in spite of threats and severe danger.
And you're very right when you say there's a psychological pressure. They try to intimidate you. They try to make you be scared and fearful for your life. I remember they were asking for national IDs of those who attend the church regularly, and then pastors had to give in and let the government know who was attending the church. And I remember that some of the members who were active in the church, their telephones were tapped, they were being followed. And imagine you all the time are looking back and trying to see if you really followed or and then we found out later on some of these people who were within our community, they were undercover agents. And then when you find out these are undercover agents and you've been worshiping with these people for years, and then you find out in integration room, he comes up to you and say, I know everything about you. And so that causes the church to go through a lot of challenging times. But again, what you mentioned is also true. The church is thriving and is growing, and the number is amazing. I remember back in the days when Dr. Van Gorder, when I came to faith, it was right before Reverend Hovsepian was kidnapped and murdered. He prayed over me, I remember, and he's His son was classmate of mine. He invited me to church. And then short after that, there was another guy who was the hero of our church, Mehdi Dibaj. He was in prison for 10 years. And he had such an amazing testimony. Never met the guy, but his story always encouraged me. When you think about his life, what do you think it still says to us today about courage, about conviction, and the cost of following Christ in Iran?
Not a day should go by that we don't honor such sisters and brothers of faith. Mehdi Dibaj, his life stands as a profound example of steadfast faith. His witness teaches us that we don't follow Christ out of preference, but it's in our unshakable identity. No amount of pressure can erase what we have in Christ. He spent 9 years in prison without a trial.
Yes.
And 2 years in solitary confinement. I mean, we can't imagine what this was like. He's in a cell 3 feet by 3 feet. And constantly they're torturing him systematically. They're mocking executions. They're designed to get Mehdi Dibaj to recant. He never does. His resolve never wavers. So finally, in 1993, this capital offense trial for apostasy, Mehdi Dibaj refuses to pretend to be a Muslim. They offer him freedom time and time again. And this is what the Reverend told the court, and I'm going to read it. I'd rather have the whole world against me, but know that the Almighty God is with me. Life for me is an opportunity to serve Christ, to serve him. And death is a better opportunity to be with Christ. My goodness. I mean, here we are 30, 40 years after that, and it rings to our hearts with such power. I mean, one of the things he did in his court case was he turned the tables on the judges. He took control of the courtroom. And he said, look, my faith is not a divine choice. God chose me. It's not a human choice. He said to the judges, maybe you can choose your religion, but I've been chosen by Christ. He absolutely refused compromise. They offered him, like I said, papers over and over. And he always said his solace was in God and the sovereignty of God. Really, if you reread what he said in the court, it's a masterclass on turning the tables on Sharia, because Sharia says you're betraying, Islam through by breaking a social contract, and he says no, that's not the opposite. He accused the government of challenging God's decrees, and what really he still says to us is obviously to keep the faith, and it's worth keeping. And God will never leave us or forsake us, and the church will always honor such men. But also that the extreme measures of the government, 9 years of imprisonment to suppress the faith, they are invalidating their own truth claims and also validating the claims of Christ to Christians. So his refusal to recant galvanized the church and the world, the global church. It's the ultimate story between individual religious liberty and the kind of the machinations of this 47-year terror, a disgrace to Islam, let alone the people of Iran, certainly not served at all, but a complete bankruptcy when you go after such a man and you can't defeat him. What a witness and testimony to the power of God. He followed Christ and he lost so much. He was stripped of his marriage. He lost his freedom. He eventually lost his life. It was total. His wife succumbed to pressure, converted back to Islam, and married another man while Mehdi Dibaj was in prison. I mean, and fortunately he was, there was this global outcry against him that rose to the level of government leaders like the President of the United States. And he was released, and then 6 months later, he was abducted. But far from silencing the church, attacks on Mehdi Dibaj and
Yeah.
Hosepian Mayor and others has grown the church. The cost is high, but the reward is greater.
I remember we've talked about Mehdi Dibaj with the pastors back in the days who used to go to the prison to visit him. They used to say to me that every time we went there to encourage him, but we came back really encouraged to see his faith, his glowing face, that he was enjoying that relationship with Jesus in prison. It was dark days, Dr. Van Gorder, when we found out that Mehdi Dibaj, Haikov Sepian, and Fatawus Mikhailian from Presbyterian Church were murdered. I remember they propped a couple of people on TV saying these are the murderers, and they accused anti-government forces and groups committing this crime. But it was obvious to us that that was the government trying to pressure the church to not to preach the gospel to Iranians. Do you see these murders that happened for Dibaj, for Haik, for Mikhailian as isolated tragedies, or as a part of a broader effort to intimidate and silence the church?
Yeah, so Bishop Hosepian Mayor, he was killed right after he advocated for, campaigned and succeeded in the release of Dibaj. Both of them refused to sign any papers saying that they'd done wrong based on constitutional rights. So you're right. This is a 6-month window, and the government's trying to eradicate the church by cutting off the leadership. All three of these men, well, especially the bishop and the other leaders, were members of the Protestant leadership in Iran. And you mentioned that the government tried to blame this on other opposition groups, but in actual fact, the government actually 4 years later, while they were going through factional disputes, they admitted that the murders were carried out by Mosques, the government agents. So yeah, the government had this strategy to intimidate the community. It had the exact opposite effect. The martyrs became powerful examples of faith, drew international attention to the plight of Christians. In just that 1 year, in 1994, 25% of Assembly of God ministers were forced to exile, to be imprisoned, to be killed in just 1 year. And that led to a lot of Christians going underground, leading to the rise of the secret house church movement. But all of these efforts to eliminate government leadership, church leadership, it's just continued to lead to church growth. And I think there's so much encouragement that we can take, that there's no weapon, as the scriptures say, formed against us that can prosper. There is nothing that the forces of darkness can do to overcome the power of God and the forces of light. And we just need to honor these men and women, and women in prison. Christian women have faced tragedies that are indescribable and not appropriate to talk about. But with, as you said, you mentioned this faith in Christ, that glowing, for me to live as Christ and to die as gain, Paul said. He wrote this in prison, Paul wrote it. And we've seen this in our lifetime. The body of Christ worldwide has seen this, the Iranian Christians. And one day in heaven, I'm sure, we're going to meet these men, and we're going to get a master class from them in being faithful to Christ. So what a privilege and honor and a blessing to think about them, to reflect on them and learn from them. But certainly the government has overplayed its hand in trying to exterminate the leadership.
Yes, they thought they're going to stop the church, but the interesting thing is, right after that, the church members started writing letters to the pastor. It was Haik Hovsepian's brother, Edward Hovsepian, who was taking over the leadership of the church. They wrote a letter to him, and all of them signed that letter that is basically was saying, we'll stand next to you. You're not alone. Signed it with their own blood and showing that we are standing next to you, and they cannot remove the faith from the church. And it's interesting. The church got more resilient. Having the challenges in their life seems like it's kind of make their faith much more stronger. And you mentioned a lot of people were exiled, forced to exile and leave the country. And as the result of that, they started planting churches in diaspora. They started to preach the gospel back into Iran through different mediums that I had in their disposal. But now that you see these churches outside of the country growing, and this challenges and the pressure the church inside the countries is experiencing, how do you see the relationship between the church inside Iran and then the church outside of the country?
Yeah, the Iranian Christian community doesn't end at any border. When I'm traveling out of the country and my wife's in another place, we're still married. You know, the barriers don't change because of geographic lines. So the relationship between Iranian Christians inside Iran and the worldwide diaspora, it's crucial. It's a lifeline. So despite the severe persecution and bans on Persian language services, the underground church is growing, supported by the diaspora. Satellite TV, online discipleship, advocacy, creating a global house church, networking, linking persecuted Christians to safe communities. Media, it's vital for house churches in 2026. Diaspora Iranians are advocating for those persecuted, drawing global attention to arrests and torture. The tragedy of this war, God is working even through that tragedy to bring to attention the resilience and determination of Christians through ministries like yours and CBN and others. So it's that pipeline effect
Yes.
is tremendously important. It's a lifeline. And just as the Irish brought life to Ireland through the diaspora, the Jewish community brought life to the Israel through the diaspora, and my ancestors who had to flee Nazi persecution in Germany brought life back to Germany from the diaspora. I think the diaspora and Iranian community advocating and supporting the Christian church in Iran is a lifeline. This morning I was talking to a friend in Tehran, and I just said to that friend, I said, "You're not alone. We're praying for you. God's with you. We're seeing you." And that person responded just this morning, about an hour before I got on. They were saying, "Thank you. You have no idea. You know, you can feel isolated, but it's just like Daniel in the lion's den, or Elijah when he felt Saul alone. When people know that they're not forgotten and that they're being honored, that's such a strength, encouragement, a comfort. So connecting the global Christian community through the diaspora, it's just helping the church in Iran grow dramatically. And also, you know, as some people are going to Armenia, to Germany, to Europe, they're actually turning to Christ, to the United States and
Yes.
Canada. They're leaving Iran, but they're meeting Iranian Christians, and then they're going back and speaking to their communities and informal networks. So it's very exciting to see this vision of partnership. And I thank your ministry and the ministries of many that support you, all the volunteers that support you, and all the people that help you. For really, I wish they could understand how important their work is to hold the anchor, to hold the Christians in Iran. So it's a beautiful interconnectivity of the church that Christ has brought. We are one, and no boundary, no weapon formed against us can prosper.
I want to thank you as well because of the heart that you have for the country, for Iran, and the passion that you have. And you bring a lot of awareness to the Western world to stand next to Iranian church and pray for them. And it is very important, especially for Iranians, to know that other brothers and sisters in the world, they see their suffering and they care for them and they pray for them. That brings a lot of hope and joy. And you write about underground fellowships and the challenge of them when they want to share their faith, such a tightly controlled environment. In a place like this, what does a faithful Christian witness look like without becoming reckless, without becoming disconnected from people's everyday reality?
Yeah, you know, it's ironic here. the extremists, the Islamists, the terrorists running that government are putting charges against Christians for enmity against God for their evangelistic activity. In fact, they're indicting themselves because they're bringing disgrace to their own faith. And again, as we've themed through this, is that they can't stop the work of God in Iran. Underground Christians are not only growing in Iran; it's one of the fastest growing church movements in the entire Middle East, and that's in spite of severe persecution. So these folks are faithful; they're realistic. They have a decentralized house church program, and now with the help of the diaspora, digital engagement. The leadership is discreet. They're wise as serpents and harmless as doves. They're not using overt public activity. They're prioritizing deep relational evangelism. So this is an unstoppable force long term. And I think we may well see in the future new Iran that we're all praying for, that these Christians will play a role of reconciliation and healing. They won't bring a vindictive spirit to any of the new, the Islam, the freedom. The day will come, you will celebrate, I'll celebrate, the whole world will celebrate the day that Iran will finally be free. But not just physical freedom, but spiritual freedom. These Christians in the underground, they're facing long prison sentences. They get threats every time they try to organize or attend or even host or attend a house church meeting. All of that's forbidden, but they're not hiding. They're actively sharing their faith in ways that they can, and sometimes needing, when necessary, fleeing persecution to continue their evangelism and witness out in other places. So it's exciting. And again, their ministries using online platforms for training and evangelism, equipping leaders in the diaspora, helping them to support Iranians, and praying in the middle of all that, praying for their oppressors, trying to build bridges, not having a defensive posture. And here it is, demonstrating hope in the middle of such despair. Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. This power of hope that we're seeing and just being energized by. And this is, so the underground church is working through all kinds of, they're not stopping, but working through trusted relationships, not high profile public events that immediately trigger state security apparatuses, but focusing on training, long-term endurance, and recognizing that that they will, to be faithful. I love how the scriptures say on the day we see Jesus face to face, he'll say, "Well done, good and faithful servants, enter into the rest prepared." The Iranian Christians, the underground Christians, are good people. They're very good people, and they're very faithful people. And there's a partnership, not just with the diasporan Iranian community, but also the Assyrian and Armenian Christians in Iran and outside. So they have a degree of freedom to worship in their own languages, but there's still God working a unity amongst all these groups. So the attempts to fraction and divide them are not going to succeed. So we can be positive looking forward.
In Iran, when you look at Iran, a lot of people may think it's a zealot Islamic country, meaning that a lot of Iranians are Shia Muslim. But it seemed like the number is declining, and the recent surveys show that it's 32%, meaning just 32% of Iranians identify themselves as Shia Muslim. Nonetheless, they still identify themselves as a Muslim. So the honest conversation between Muslims and Christians can be very difficult, even though a lot of them are nominal Muslims. In that kind of atmosphere, what kind of dialogue do you think it is possible in Iran today, and what kind of a posture does it require?
Well, at the time of Jesus, the Pharisees, people like Nicodemus, were seen as enemies, but many of them quietly in their heart came to Jesus and said, that they were open. So I think we can take we shouldn't look at labels. The Bible says, and I think it's Samuel, God looks at outward, humans look at outward labels and categories, but God looks at the heart. And through dreams and visions, through the living example of faithful Christians, people can know, even leadership. There's been some interesting through the decades, not recently, but through the decades with Qom leadership, Iranian Shia leadership, with meeting with Mennonites, and in other ways. So there have been official conferences taking place. There was actually one scheduled in Karaj that obviously probably won't be scheduled, a series of Islam Orthodox Christian series. So these are global kind of public things that are happening despite the high political tension and severe restrictions. So there's a kind of a formal or public approach, but then what the real dialogue between Muslims and Christians in Iran is often quiet. It happens in parks, shared social spaces, house churches, coming together to watch a satellite broadcast or telling someone where to listen to one. So cultural nuances, public parks and other places where people can share common interests. So Christians, Armenian, Assyrian, but also other Christians taking a role in the community, looking for the welfare of the community. And then that's as a way to show that they love the whole world, yes, and they love Christ, but they also love Iran. These are patriotic people, and they love their neighbors. They care for their neighbors. So that's a meaningful engagement. Instead of thinking about a debate with Muslims, think about experiencing life together, and looking past the labels, looking past the bluster and the bravado, and speaking to the heart. Sidestep the political, sidestep the friction, center on human dignity, center on social justice, center on your family needs and being compassionate and the love and power of God. And I don't know, I've been moving among Iranians in dialogue, both Muslim and Christian, for decades, and I've never experienced any hesitation or resistance to that. So maybe people aren't going to be drawn by theological arguments, but transformed lives, inner peace, that will speak and open up all kinds of dialogue and evangelism. So yes, they're facing a lot of legal, political problems. But you can, people are using birthday parties, private relationships to share their faith. So let's not look at be afraid. There's a famous story in Pilgrim's Progress where Pilgrim is climbing up a steep cliff, and there's a huge barking lion, or yelling, screaming lion, roaring, I guess. Sorry, roaring. I have to go to a zoo. I haven't been to one lately. A roaring lion who's standing in the way, and it's dark. So Pilgrim just stops and prays. And in the morning, when the light is there, he sees that fierce lion who is making all this noise is chained to the wall. So Christian Pilgrim can just walk right around him. So I think we need to look past, look past the bluster and recognize that these people are afraid and terrified. They have no hope. They have no security. So it's just bravado. But, around the world, there's a stereotype politically and all kinds of, the Iranian people are very tough and resilient and fierce and stubborn. But that is what the Christian church is. That's a beautiful, those wonderful qualities of loyalty and dedication and ferocity and determination. That is what Iranians of all religions look up to, and they see that in the dialogue when they interact with Iranian Christians.
Let me ask you the last question, Dr. Van Gorder. When you think about future, what gives you hope for Christians and other religious minorities in Iran?
So right now, Corrie ten Boom, she was in a concentration camp, and she said, look around you in a concentration camp and be depressed. Look inside of you and feel distressed. Look at Jesus and be at rest. So yes, Christians right now facing severe repression, they have in the middle of that hope. And, we see not just hope from them as Christians, but look at the recent movements. Think of the women life freedom demonstrations.
Yes.
Look at the recent demonstrations in January. A massive desire there in Iran for a more pluralistic, a more inclusive society. And Christians are part of that. So the government's trying to enforce a singular religious identity. What it's leading to is Iranians leaving religion or looking for alternatives. So these cultural shifts are creating a natural opening for recognition. And yes, ongoing arrests, scapegoating. It's never been worse. In fact, within this last year, 2025, it's been one of the worst years for Christian persecution. And we're not, the outside world is not always cognizant of that. But in spite of those arrests ongoing and scapegoating, the Christians are growing with resilience. Mm-hmm. And one day an open and vibrant Iran will come to the world, and restrictions will be lifted for all of these minorities, including the Baha'i and Sunni Muslims and converts from Islam. So I think even non-Christians are wanting a just future where equal protections will happen. And there's that political hope that these corruptors of their own message will finally come to an end. Their yelling efforts will finally be null and void. But also there's hope for the Iranian people that they will be able to stand on their feet. Yes, remove the political barriers, but there's so much hope. I mean, the educational quality, the work ethic. There's just so many reasons for hope. Yes, the future is uncertain. We're right now here in a moment of political flux, and it could be hardline control or significant reform. But either way, the church is going to grow and the church is going to prosper. So I think we have a lot of reasons for hope.
And I want to thank you not only for being on the show today, but also for writing the book Christianity in Persia and the Status of Non-Muslim in Modern Iran. I really enjoy it. And I really encourage, yes.
Well, I just want to say the honor is absolutely mine. It's a great privilege to stand with the church worldwide, with our brothers, with our sisters in Iran, now in this time of crisis, but it's my great honor and great privilege. So let's just continue to pray for good news, and maybe you and I can meet in Tehran this time next year.
Absolutely. I'm going to take you to one of the traditional places, a restaurant that you enjoy, a very Persian cuisine, and I hope you like it.
I'm looking forward to it. There's hope for that.
Thank you very much again, Dr. Van Gorder, and God bless you, and looking forward to meet you in person and see you in many seminars in future. We talk about how God is moving in Iran.
God bless you. Thanks.
Dr. Van Gorder, thank you for joining me on Unmuted. This has been a thoughtful and deeply needed conversation, one that helps us better understand the history, the pressure, and the resilience of Christians and other religious minorities in Iran. And to everyone listening, thank you for being with us. At Heart for Iran, we're committed to amplifying the truth, strengthening the church, and standing with the people of Iran in these crucial moments. If this conversation encouraged you, share this episode, subscribe to Unmuted, and help us bring more voices and stories like this to others. And as always, stay engaged, stay informed, and stay unmuted.